There's a vast frozen continent where multiple nations are competing for influence, all claiming peaceful intentions. You might be thinking Greenland, but I'm actually talking about Antarctica. Antarctica is generally thought of as a beautiful but remote frozen wilderness, home to seals and dancing penguins, but that's far from reality. It sits at the intersection of space tracking, undersea cables, long-range surveillance, and competition between the great powers. And while the Antarctic Treaty strictly forbids military buildups there, in times of conflict, treaties aren't always reliable. Antarctica sits right on Australia's doorstep. It shapes our southern approaches, our space security and national security. As China ramps up investment in new Antarctic stations and advanced technology, Australia needs to think beyond just our northern approaches. The South is becoming just as strategically important. Today, let's take a look at Antarctica, the treaty that governs it, what is actually happening there, and how Australia can use it strategically to defend against potential aggressors. I'm Mel Pikos, and today we're talking tactics. A brief history of Antarctica. For most of human history, Antarctica was only a theory, a vast southern landmass imagined by ancient Greeks to balance the world. The first confirmed sighting came in 1820 when expeditions from Russia, Britain, and the United States independently reported seeing the icy continent. Early visits were brutal and temporary, driven by sealing and exploration rather than settlement. The early 20th century saw Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen reach the South Pole first, just weeks ahead of Britain's Robert Falcon Scott, whose return journey ended in tragedy. After World War II, interest in Antarctica shifted from conquest to science, leading to the establishment of permanent research stations during the 1950s. This scientific focus was formalised in 1959 with the Antarctic Treaty, which set the continent aside for peaceful research, international cooperation, and forbidding military activity. Today, Antarctica has no permanent population, but it hosts dozens of research bases and plays a critical role in climate science, global weather systems, and increasingly strategic competition in the modern era. The Antarctic Treaty. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959 at the height of the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were competing across the globe, and there were real fears that Antarctica could become the next militarized frontier. The goal of the treaty was to prevent the southern continent from becoming a battleground or being carved up by force. Today, the treaty has more than 50 parties. Key signatories include Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, China, Russia, Japan, India, France, Germany, and many others. At its core, the treaty sets out several fundamental principles. Antarctica is to be used for peaceful purposes only. Military bases, fortifications, and weapons testing are explicitly banned. Nuclear explosions and the disposal of radioactive waste are also prohibited. Scientific research, on the other hand, is actively encouraged, with a strong emphasis on cooperation, data sharing, and transparency between nations. Territorial claims are neither recognised nor abolished. Instead, they are frozen in place. No country can expand an existing claim or make a new one while the treaty is in force. This was a diplomatic compromise that allowed rival powers to cooperate without resolving sovereignty disputes. While the Antarctic Treaty bans overt militarization, it does not ban strategic positioning, dual-use infrastructure, space tracking, signals intelligence, or satellite ground stations, because those concepts barely existed at the time. And that grey zone is becoming more important as Antarctica's role in global communications, space monitoring, and strategic geography grows. Australia in Antarctica. Australia holds the single largest territorial claim in Antarctica, covering around 42% of the continent. There is a continuous presence through a network of permanent research stations. Casey Station sits in East Antarctica and focuses on coastal research, glaciology, and atmospheric science. Davis Station plays a major role in climate monitoring, oceanography, and biological research. Mawson Station is Australia's oldest base, established in 1954, and remains a critical hub for geology, meteorology, and long-term climate observation. Australia also operates Macquarie Island Station in the sub-Antarctic. It allows Australia to monitor the Southern Ocean, track weather systems, study ecosystems, and observe changes that directly affect Australia's climate and maritime environment. Australia's focus on Antarctica is science. Climate and atmospheric research also helps scientists understand global warming and extreme weather. Marine and ecosystem science tracks changes in fish stocks, krill populations, and biodiversity. Ice core sampling provides climate records stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, shaping global climate models used by governments worldwide. This gives Australia a strong science-led presence in Antarctica, but one that exists within an increasingly crowded international environment. The USA and other countries in Antarctica. The United States is the dominant presence in Antarctica. It operates McMurdo Station, by far the largest facility on the continent. McMurdo functions less like a remote research outpost and more like a small town, supporting hundreds of personnel, multiple airfields all year round. It exists to support scientific research, particularly in space and atmospheric science, including satellite studies and upper atmosphere monitoring. To keep it running, the US relies heavily on military aircraft and personnel. C-17s, LC-130 ski-equipped aircraft, and uniformed service members handle logistics and emergency response. This is all permitted under the Antarctic Treaty, which allows military assets when used for peaceful or scientific purposes. And the US is not alone. Russia maintains multiple stations, even under economic strain. European nations focus on climate science while building polar logistics expertise. India, South Korea, and others have expanded their presence as well. No one openly militarizes Antarctica, but everyone understands its value, not as a battlefield, but as a quiet enabler to modern military and global systems. China's activities in Antarctica. China's Antarctic presence has expanded rapidly over the past 2 decades. Beijing now operates multiple research stations across the continent. These include Great Wall Station, Zhongshan Station, and Kunlan Station, deep inland on the Antarctic Plateau. And in 2024, China opened their 5th Antarctic site, the Qinling Station, and it has attracted attention well beyond the scientific community. It's located on the rocky edge of the inexpressible island in Terra Nova Bay and sits due south of Australia and New Zealand. State media and Chinese officials framed the opening as a boost to Antarctic science and international cooperation intended to deepen understanding of climate ecosystems and polar change. But analysts have flagged it as strategically noteworthy and said it was likely to include an observatory and satellite ground station infrastructure, which could be used for signals collection or tracking launches from Australian space facilities, even though China has denied any espionage intent. Plans have already been lodged for a 6th station in West Antarctica aimed at summer research and logistics support, highlighting Beijing's ongoing growth in the region, long dominated by Western powers. On paper, the focus is science, but many of these systems are inherently dual use. Equipment designed to study the ionosphere can also support space tracking. Communications research can overlap with signals monitoring. Satellite ground stations can contribute to space domain awareness. China rarely violates treaties outright. Instead, it operates in legal grey zones, always formally compliant, but always pushing the boundaries and maximising strategic advantage without triggering a clear red line. They appear to be following the exact same playbook in Antarctica. Why Antarctica matters for Australia's security. For Australia, Antarctica is not some distant abstraction. It is right on our doorstep. The continent sits beneath some of the most important orbital pathways on the planet. That makes it a quiet but valuable node in the global system of satellites, sensors, and communications that modern militaries rely on. Data collected in Antarctica can feed directly into space operations, missile warning systems, long-range surveillance networks, and global communications infrastructure. These systems are not isolated. They are interconnected, and they do not stop at borders. Together, they form the largely invisible backbone of modern defense. Our national security depends heavily on space-based systems for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and communications. It depends on undersea cables that carry data in and out of the country. It depends on reliable satellite connectivity across vast distances, especially in the maritime domain. And Antarctica has the potential to influence all three. What happens if war breaks out? Treaties are strongest in peacetime, but in a major war, those agreements come under strain. If a large-scale conflict were to erupt, Antarctica would not suddenly become a battlefield. You wouldn't see armoured units crossing the ice or large military formations massing at the South Pole. The environment alone makes Antarctica one of the worst places on Earth to sustain a conventional military occupation or position an invasion force. Any aggressor attempting to directly invade Australia would not come from Antarctica. More likely, Antarctica could become an intelligence collection zone, a space support hub, a strategic rear area that quietly enables operations elsewhere across the southern hemisphere. From Antarctica, long-range sensors could help track satellite movements and missile launches. Ground stations could support space operations, communications relay, and navigations systems. Naval activity would likely remain limited, but not irrelevant. Surface vessels could operate in surrounding waters on logistics missions. Submarines could transit the Southern Ocean using its remoteness to avoid detection. Missiles would almost certainly not be based in Antarctica, but data gathered there could still feed into missile targeting, early warning, and strategic decision-making elsewhere. Antarctica could also serve as a logistics and sustainment backstop. Not a frontline base, but a place to support long-duration operations in the southern hemisphere, especially if access to other ports and facilities became contested. What should Australia be doing? Australia doesn't need to panic, but it does need to be serious, disciplined, and realistic about the environment it is operating in. That does not mean building military bases in Antarctica. In fact, doing so would carry real risks. China and Russia would likely justify their own expanded presence. Inspections would increase. Trust would erode. Antarctica could slide from a managed rules-based space into a contested grey zone. So the challenge for Australia is not how to militarise Antarctica, but how to operate seriously within the existing framework while preparing for a less cooperative future. That starts with expanding monitoring and domain awareness across the Antarctic region and the Southern Ocean, knowing who is operating there, what infrastructure is being built, and how activities are changing over time is essential. It also means strengthening cooperation with allies and partners who share an interest in transparency, scientific integrity, and regional stability. Australia also needs to protect the systems it relies on every day. Space assets, satellite ground links, and undersea cables that connect Australia to the world are critical national infrastructure. Many of them intersect directly or indirectly with the Antarctic region. Investment in Antarctic logistics is another key pillar, not to support combat forces, but to sustain our presence. Icebreakers, transport aircraft, communications infrastructure, and year-round operational capacity all matter. Presence does not have to be military to be strategic. And critically, Australia needs to think about Antarctica as part of its broader strategic environment, not just as a scientific frontier. From Greenland to Antarctica. The arguments over Greenland have taught the world an important lesson. Remote places don't stay irrelevant forever. They become valuable when technology catches up. Antarctica is heading the same way. It's still peaceful and still protected, but no longer strategically invisible. And for Australia, sitting close to the southern frontier, the question isn't if Antarctica matters. It's whether we're ready for the moment when everyone else finally realizes it does. But what do you think? Should Australia be doing more to shape what happens in Antarctica? Or is restraint still the smarter move? Is China's expanding footprint on the ice a genuine strategic concern? Or simply what great powers do when they're thinking long term? And if a major war did break out, would the Antarctic Treaty actually constrain behaviour? Or would it quietly give way to strategic reality? Let me know in the comments section down below. That's it for today. I'm Mel Pikos, and we've been talking tactics.